This is the place, all right. Kiss me. Once we cross, it could all be different.
Let's go.
Welcome to Twin Peaks Rewatch. From Idle Thumbs, I'm Chris Remo.
I'm Jake Rodkin.
And on this episode, we are discussing Twin Peaks The Return, Part 18.
That's right. If you just got here this week and are wondering what happened to the episode where we discussed Part 17, we decided it was irrelevant after watching Part 18. No, we actually recorded 2 episodes this week and released them back to back. So if you are listening to this and didn't hear Part 17, go into your podcast app or whatever thing you use to listen to podcasts, and you can find it. One episode previous, we did a whole really long episode about that.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're going to combine them into one episode, but we spent the amount of time it takes to discuss an episode to discuss that episode. Go figure.
It would have been like a 3-hour podcast. Yeah. So instead, two short ones.
Again.
Back at it again. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Jake.
This episode of Twin Peaks was written by Mark Frost and David Lynch. It was directed by David Lynch, and it aired September 3rd, 2017. Chris, enlighten me. What the hell happened this week on Twin Peaks?
I don't know, Jake. I don't really know. But let's say that Bad Coop and Dougie got the endings they deserve. Cooper sets out to right long festering wrongs, and the world of Twin Peaks may never be the same.
Well,
kind of made that up as I was talking. It's not what I wrote down, but I don't know how to describe what
did you write down?
This was a different version of what I just said.
Okay.
With some different conclusions.
Oh, so the one you wrote down exists in another reality.
We are all dreamers. This episode. As we said, in the previous podcast, in our initial thoughts, this episode, the longer I sit with it, the more I like it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm coming to a lot more specific conclusions about how to explain it.
Yeah. I mean, we can spend a lot of time talking about what happened, and I'm sure that we will.
Yeah.
But what does it all mean? And the slightly separate question of what do we take from it are almost separate from the linear description of what happened inside of it.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I think in a general sense, the thing I took from this, and I think it's pretty appropriate given the totality of Twin Peaks to date, there are different possibilities. I mean, we live in a world of uncertainties and of, to some degree, malleable reality. In Twin Peaks, that seems to be literally true. But, in a general sense, we all kind of live in perpetual uncertainty and with things we regret and things we remember fondly and so on. And I think the takeaway from this episode, particularly the conclusion, is that living in the past or trying to wrench the past into the version of it that you want is probably a futile gesture.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very simplistic
sort
of one-note reading, obviously, and I don't think that's all that is being said. I think that's part of it, and that was the thing that I was most viscerally left with, but we can obviously get into everything else that it means in the context of Twin Peaks lore and what we might think that means and what it might be saying about anything else.
I guess.
Did you have any overall thoughts or takeaways?
To your point about it being futile to change things, I do think though that this episode cemented for me that while that is true, I don't think that it necessarily. Wow, how do I say this? This is really hard. It's really hard to get this out. Sorry,
I found it hard to get mine out.
Cooper and Laura both seem to me like people who are still striving for change and striving to improve their situations and maybe striving to improve reality They're just like the world in which they live, their lives, sort of, etc. But they both feel like characters who use what agency they have to try and improve things, try to get themselves out of the badness. But I feel like we saw some version of Cooper basically overreaching that, or like extending outside of his means. And I'm not entirely sure how to align that with any bigger message, because I don't think that it was explicitly a moral judgment. But the show sort of finally seeming to declare that there is a line there, and that those have extents, and that you can go too far, and that you can maybe overreach, or there is some element of hubris to it, almost maybe.
Yeah.
It's been a lot to watch and think about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, do you want to start, I guess, talking? I mean, I'm sure we'll come to more reflections as we talk about the specific events of the episode.
Scene 1, Cooper shrouded in flame.
Yeah, good shot.
This is the first time that we've seen Doppelganger Cooper with those blue doppelganger eyes since
that's true.
Season 2 finale.
Yeah.
So just from a little nuts and bolts lore perspective, if you were wondering if that is actually the same guy that walked out, or if we missed something, the show seems to be saying that it's that guy again.
Yeah. Apparently, it was Kyle MacLachlan's idea to give him the black contacts in the current.
Just when he's walking around.
Throughout. Yeah. So this
it was a really good look, but I guess to see them sort of filled with blue almost felt like something different was reflecting in them now that he's back in that room than was before.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess, geez, this is early to start getting into all of this stuff.
Yeah,
but
no, it's not.
It's not. It never is. So in this episode of Twin Peaks Rewatch, many postulations will be put forward, I imagine, in a way that we did not usually previously, because there's nothing left.
That's what. Yes,
that's all.
This
that
episode
we have.
Gives you no choice.
In this episode, we were given very explicitly sort of a second version of reality, whether it's a different timeline or actually a completely different, subtly changed universe. It made me reevaluate the Red Room as a space and all the lodges as a space. It made me reevaluate even the doppelgangers. The doppelgangers have always felt like, they're like your shadow self, or like another version of you or another facet of you. They could also, in some ways, maybe just actually be transitory different versions of you that have come in and out of these other different versions of the world. Not to literally say in a sci-fi way that there's like the good universe and the bad universe, but almost we only see a couple of different versions of reality. The show's never explicit as to whether or not all of those roadhouse scenes with different characters talking, and the thing that Audrey is in, and the place that Cooper finds himself when he's Richard, if those are one other place or if there's a multitude of places. But the idea that sort of versions of you from a different life somehow sort of tumble through the weird machinery at the end of Twin Peaks and can end up in the wrong place, or deliberately end up in a different place in the case of Bad Coop. I just thought about that a lot this episode, about how like we and a lot of other people have talked about how Bad Coop isn't explicitly just, we call him Bad Coop, but he's not like, there's more to him than just being an evil god. He is a person still. He's a fucked up person. It reminded me though of the blue-eyed doppelganger Leland in the finale of season 2, who just walked by and said, "I never killed anybody," and then walked away. Of like seeing that now, and like seeing this Cooper in this space, and seeing quote unquote good Coop go to this other world, and seeing the Laura Palmer from that world made me think back to the season 2 finale with the characters walking in and out who seeed to just have completely different interiorities, especially that Leland, that one Leland who says, "I didn't kill anyone." It made me just think, this episode of Twin Peaks seems very much about inevitability, not necessarily of specific events, but of trends and human behavior, and of sort of the cycles of violence that humans inflict on themselves, the cycles just of life. And you're seeing, Cooper tries to change something, ends up in a different world where he continues to try and change something. That world doesn't even line up with his world or his perceptions of what's going on. He keeps trying to change it and just makes increasingly bad things seem to happen.
Yeah.
But even just the Laura that you see there versus the Laura that we know, I don't think it's trying to specifically say Laura Palmer or like that human vessel is always going to have a fucked up confusing life. It seems like it's trying to say something more broad than that. Man, I'm getting way out in the weeds.
No, I think...
Anyway, all I'm saying is the owl cave turns into an infinity symbol with a human swirling through it, and this episode went in big on that.
Yeah.
Wow. I've lost my thread.
That's okay. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, and I think as sort of mentioned I sort of talked about this a bit on the last podcast, the previous podcast we did on 17, but I think the presence of the additional Cooper that we see for most of this episode, I think really backs up your general point about doppelgangers. Not so much there's like the evil version of you that's a doppelganger, and more there are all of these aspects of people who sort of all kind of swirling around, maybe with the lodges and related places as kind of stopping, rest houses kind of. Yeah,
like all of the little lodges and the red room stuff, all of the sort of the space that exists in between. Almost, this episode did a great job for me of almost bottling all of that stuff back up into its own little enclosed space. Like throughout this entire season, I felt like, geez, the entire world of Twin Peaks seems like this metaphysical science fiction space where like basically aliens and weird alternate people are walking around. And this episode kind of did cinch all of it back up and say, all of these realities that are just like Earth, they are all effectively reality. And then there is this other thing up there that is kind of lore and kind of helps to expand them all out and show them as an analogy, or helps show them as a pastiche, but it's not. I'm so much more comfortable with Twin Peaks after this episode, which I didn't expect to be. With Twin Peaks: The Return, with Twin Peaks: The Return in particular, because I was having so much trouble understanding how does it all work, what does it all mean, what the hell is all of this journey through weird alien technology and stuff, and now being able to sort of say, well, it all is literally actually a lens through which to see. Yeah, this, what Frost and Lynch have to say about the entirety of human violence, the entirety of the effects of, civilization, progress for progress' sake, whatever the hell else, it makes the giant and his little robot that is actually a movie theater suddenly feel surprisingly relevant to all of the different weird pastiche scenes that we've seen over the course of the season. Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I think I was thinking about as well that I forgot to mention on the previous podcast, but I think is just as relevant given what you're talking about, is the combination of the duration of this season and then this episode. It puts me in mind of something we talked about a couple episodes ago that I think you were referring to, kind of where the world of Twin Peaks, as represented in the first two seasons of the show, feels almost hermetically sealed in its own little pocket universe of kind of goodness, and that's what charms. Even though terrible things have happened there, Cooper is very much charmed by this place that feels almost out of time, and people still live this particular kind of wonderful life. Which again, like terrible things are constantly happening in this town, but it is portrayed very romantically, nonetheless. In this season, when we are brought back to Twin Peaks, there are shots like the one that keeps happening of the sheriff's station where you've got these incredible, brilliant God rays behind it, almost as if to suggest like this is that incredible place. And then everywhere else we are in Twin Peaks: The Return it just looks and feels a lot more like the world, except even more outrageous and terrible things happen. Right. The one place that it's not muted like that in all of Twin Peaks: The Return, other than the town of Twin Peaks, is the inside of the Jones household. That's exactly right. Yeah. Whatever. And that, I'm trying to coalesce everything I was trying to say here, but it somehow does seem connected to when you think of part 8 of The Return. Laura Palmer, or whatever exactly that meant, being sent to Earth after Bob, is vomited out and sent. It does suggest like there is something special about this particular place, Twin Peaks. Maybe because of her, being sent there. Maybe because
maybe there always has been something, and that's related to Glastonbury Grove and the woods and everything.
And Jackrabbit's Palace.
Those
2 places where there's a little lumpy pond next to a tree.
Yeah. The end of episode 7, part 17, we're brought back to that hyper-saturated, Twin Peaks. This is Twin Peaks. And Cooper is so ebullient, and he's so happy to see everyone, and he hopes he sees them all again.
The world that Bad Coop finds himself in when he turns around and looks at the sheriff's station, basically, when he's plopped really hardcore into that space, and then it gets even more and more and more of that over that scene.
Yeah. And part 18 really wrenches us away from that. We're brought back.
I mean, like in a literal way, when Cooper's hand disconnects from Laura, and then you don't know what's going to happen at that point.
And even when he makes it back to Twin Peaks, it's a muted, less inviting version of it. He doesn't stop and sort of see the double R and kind of think about the cherry pie or anything.
Yeah.
There's something
when he walks out of Glastonbury Grove and meets Diane, it feels like that's already the Cooper that sort of has a little bit of a half mask over himself at that point.
Yeah. And I don't know exactly what it all means, but it feels really it all links up to me in a way that feels intuitively convincing and meaningful, but I'm having a really hard time conveying my takeaway from it. I think I thought I had a more concrete point to make than I think I do in reality. But there's something about the way that we transitioned from how everything is portrayed in part 17 to how everything is portrayed in part 18, and the way Cooper changes and being in this clearly off-kilter reality where everything's a little bit different, and then remembering how we left Audrey. It all tracks in a way that I feel would strike me on an intuitively correct, or not correct, but intuitively satisfying or meaningful level if I were watching, say, a David Lynch film. But then once you've stretched it out over 18 hours, my brain just wants there, because we spent so much time with all these different threads and just so many hours watching and picking this stuff apart, my brain wants there to be a bunch of more specific, concrete resolutions.
I know.
And I don't know that I'm going to get that, but I also think over time I will need that less and less.
I think so too.
The more all of these emotional takeaways just kind of marinate in my brain.
I feel the same way. When I got to the end of 18, man, we're one shot into this recap also, by the way. Let the record show we've literally talked about the shot of Cooper on fire in the Red Room. That's it. But when I got to the end, even though I was riding pretty high on the experience of having gone through the twists and turns and the just crazy emotions that it put me through, I remember the first thing that I wrote to you, I think, or to sort of just the Twin Peaks discussion little chat that we're in, was I loved it, but I still found it incredibly frustrating that all of the things that seemed connected were just scratching at the edges of this episode and not explicitly connecting. At the beginning, I was just like, please, someone in this world that Cooper has found himself in, say Billy. Just fucking say Billy. Say it. Say one of those names. Well, Richard and Linda show up, but Richard and Linda none of those things are explicitly connected.
The thing I was going to say is the woman who lives in the ostensible Palmer house references she is Tremont and bought the house from a Chalfont.
Right, but that still doesn't connect to any of the Roadhouse stuff. It doesn't connect to Audrey. It doesn't connect to any of that stuff. But yeah, that was just that almost felt like the way that a horror franchise will at the very end have the killer still be alive. Where you're like, oh, we're in a completely different world separate from lore.
Or are we?
Hello there, don't mind me. I'm just the same character name from previous mysterious disappearances related to the lodge. Anyway, I live here now.
To be continued.
Yeah, deliver me some Meals on Wheels or make Chet Desmond disappear in my trailer. Bye.
Mrs. Tremont will return, it says in the credits.
Yeah, no, that at the end. And then Cooper, that name didn't register with Cooper, even though he'd encountered both of those names in his case before. It's fine, though.
Did he directly interact? I forget. I don't know
if he actually ever talked to either of them. That's true.
We know it was Donna's Meals on Wheels interactions, and then the trailer park in Fire Walk with Me are the contexts.
Are the places that the Tremonts and then the Chalfonts showed up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and Tremont and Chalfont was the same. That woman had both names.
It's the same woman in both. But
anyway, that's way later. In the episode.
You know what I mean, though, of just I was just
totally.
itching for something concrete, just for one little thread to cinch in explicitly to tell me it's okay. What you're seeing is okay. Yeah. The show had no interest in telling me that it was
Lynch
okay.
Is the anti M. Night Shyamalan.
It in fact
in terms of instinct to provide that.
It wanted me to know that it was not okay. Like there was that little horse on the mantle, but also there was a guy
in Carrie Page's house.
And the guy who shot himself, I saw someone zoom in, and it looked like he might have barfed out Garmonbozia before he was shot. Whether he was murdered or killed himself, who can say?
Yeah.
Again, just like, it just means that everything's bad everywhere, but not in any explicit way that's meaningful.
Yeah, yeah.
Except maybe we should move on for a second and talk about where things maybe aren't totally bad, but secretly are still bad. The Dougie Jones story.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a new Dougie who says, "Where am I?" Which is pretty coherent for Dougie, but we don't know. Really.
We don't know. My assumption is that Dougie is still going to be a doof, but that he's less
going to be more functional than the Coop Dougie was.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make, is that we've only ever seen real Dougie Jones say about 3 lines of dialogue total. When he first gets teleported into the lodge and his head explodes in like episode 3. Then for the rest of it, it was actually Cooper, as we know very definitively. It was Dale Cooper with a very weird filter over his brain because he wasn't all the way there. Then we've seen this new Dougie say, "Where am I?" Also, Kyle MacLachlan did a great job of like punching up his goiter. Like, pushing his face together to just look like a paunch man.
Yeah.
But then the last thing that you see Dougie do is echo something that Janie E says to just like, oh no, maybe it's still terrible. Maybe their life is going to be still bad.
The thing that I always assumed about the original Dougie Jones is that he was more functional than Cooper as Dougie, but still frequently acted like
just kind of out.
Which is why it wasn't completely out of the question for characters to treat him with some degree of normalcy.
Cooper, when he was seeing the world through whatever 400 layers of the fog, would have never been able to say, "Where am I?" when he showed up in a new space. He would have just looked around and maybe sort of picked at the chair until he found a lockpick and escaped magically.
Right. Exactly.
I also the little ball that turned into his head. I saw a lot of people talk about this online too, and I felt like really smart and perceptive, even though it doesn't mean anything. But the thing that I thought about was the effect in the original Wizard of Oz when Glinda the Good Witch appears everywhere. Which I guess Lynch references the Wizard of Oz pretty often, according to people who are smarter than me. But I said, "Oh, that looks like the Wizard of Oz." I don't know why it does. Yeah, he was sent home. I guess that's what it is. That's my smart assessment.
Home,
smart guy. Home.
So anyway, we then return to, we get sort of a reprise of Cooper and Laura
which
in
is
the woods.
Presumably just us being shown the footage again.
I assume so,
But as with everything in this show, it's hard to know if that's literally because we're just seeing the footage again or because it happens twice.
In my notes, I wrote "same shots?" ? So she disappears again, screams, and then we're in the Red Room. And Mike says, "Is it future or is it past?" Which obviously we've gotten that before, but it's just
we had
increasingly relevant.
Mike literally, this shot is from episode 2. Mike saying that is exactly from episode 2. But now you're like, oh, okay.
I really wonder.
Yeah, it really feels like.
Yeah, and then Cooper essentially asks himself that at the end of the episode.
Yes,
in different words. But yes, I mean that is a big concern, and actually that is also relevant, I think, for during all of the Cooper and Diane / Richard and Linda stuff, because of the way the timeline changes.
Everything from when he pops out of here feels like it's hard to know. Like even when Cooper first appears and he and Diane are looking at each other and asking if it's really you and those things. It feels like that has to be because they're both thinking, I know that the last time that we were in a situation remotely like this, it was under completely dishonest and out and just like totally fucked up circumstances.
Yep.
The last time she saw Agent Cooper just walk into her life, basically.
Right.
Mike disappears, and then he
sort of he blinks away kind of, and then Cooper sees a chair, sees Mike in the corner of the room.
Yeah.
Walks to the corner through the curtains, follows Mike into the room with the arm, who, again, it reintroduces itself.
He says, "I'm the arm and I sound like this.
I talk like this, yeah."
Or I talk, That's right.
And that makes those sort of whispering sounds. But
that
then
actually sounded like, for the first, I don't know if it was the same sound that he made before, but it sounded to me kind of like the sound of the ceiling fan. I wondered if it was supposed to actually evoke that, because he sort of goes, and I wonder if that
I
was
always think of the
supposed
ceiling
to,
fan as being like, woof, woof,
oh,
like
maybe
a lower,
so. Maybe so.
Could be a sped up version, or
I don't know.
who knows?
It was just me projecting. I want everything to sound like that fan, Chris. I just love that sound.
It's a good sound. And then the arm asks, "Is it the story of the little girl who lived down the lane?" Which is what Audrey asks of Charlie.
Yes.
Several episodes ago.
Yep.
So I don't know what that means. I mean, I wondered when Audrey was saying it, was she referring to Laura Palmer? Was she referring to herself? Is she referring
all
to
of these
the
things?
girl in part 8?
I mean, I wonder. I talked to Diana, my wife, about that sentence a lot and how it came back, and just is it the same way that people keep asking online in our forums and ourselves, who is the dreamer, from that question that the Monica Bellucci that she quotes. This sort of the story of the girl who lived down the lane, quote unquote, can kind of be a generic, like if Twin Peaks was framed like a 1960s Disney cartoon and the entirety of everything that we've seen from episode 1 through the end of The Return was inside a gilded book that says the story of the girl who lived down the lane,
Right.
That would not be wrong. Like the story of the girl who lived down the lane, yeah, like you said, could be Laura or Audrey or probably any of the like groups of girls we've seen cut to inside of the Roadhouse who don't track to anyone. It could be the new Laura that we see. It could be Diane.
Yep.
And it, like that little name would kind of depressingly encapsulate all of them really successfully, I think.
Mm-hmm.
To the answer to the arms question, yes, it is that story, I think.
So next we get Cooper walking down a hallway,
Talking, and then Laura leans down and whispers into his ear again, which I think is the third time in Twin Peaks that we've seen this shot.
Yeah.
But they recreated it with the older actors
Right.
for part 2 of this scene. So this is the second time we've seen the old characters do it, and it ends with Laura screaming and getting pulled away.
Yeah.
It's in this episode, Laura screams 3 different times, and I wonder if they're all actually the same event.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
You know, like if
Is it
sort
the
of
same recording? Yeah, I don't know.
if it's not all the same recording, but if sort of all of those things are supposed to like
Oh,
line up
happening
temporally,
at
like
the
Laura being led by Cooper out of the woods, screaming and disappearing, Laura in the red room screaming and disappearing, and Laura having whatever realization she has, or not Laura. What's the woman's name?
Carrie.
Yeah, and Carrie outside of the Palmer house having. I don't know what the fuck that would actually mean.
That's an interesting.
But like, I wonder if that's actually sort
thought,
of
though.
like the atemporal like line that runs through all 3 of those things.
Right.
Because
they all do exist in different like places,
different
so to
places,
speak.
different capital P places, basically.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thought that definitely did not occur to me, but that's
it didn't.
And I still don't really know what it means.
I don't know what
it's
it means either, but
it's a really interesting just sort of thing to ruminate on.
Yeah.
So anyway, Cooper then walks over to Leland in a chair, and Leland says, "Find Laura."
Yes, that's also what happened in episode 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same.
It's interesting that does anyone else explicitly give Cooper instructions to find Laura?
I don't think anyone else specifically says to find Laura. No, I mean the stuff that like
it's weird that Leland of all people is the one that he would take that instruction from and then follow it to his like
Leland
most extreme, circumstance.
Yeah,
he's not exactly a.
I feel like there's got to be something there, and it's just not something that I'm good enough to pick up on. Like, why specifically did Lynch and Frost choose to have it be Leland who says that? Mm-hmm. Not Blue-Eyed Leland, not any other character. Not Laura herself.
It's also right. So that I don't know the answer to. It also seems pretty clear that, especially given the version of Cooper we get, so for the most of the rest of this episode, he is a slightly different aspect of Cooper than either classic Dale Cooper or Cooper's doppelganger.
Yeah.
He also, given everything we heard from Gordon Cole in the previous episode, the motivations for finding Laura are clearly not just save Laura Palmer, this one specific victim of terrible trauma. It's like as we know from part 8, there is some connection.
It's like find and destroy evil in the world, almost.
Yeah.
Like
Destroy Judy.
an
Destroy this
audacious thing that seems doomed to not work, but
Yeah.
they're for some reason compelled to do it.
Yeah, and Laura is the way you will do that. That's what she was created for, or imbued with
Or
this
she
power,
represents
or-
that in this one
Right,
specific instance
exactly,
or whatever.
Whatever exactly that means.
Yeah.
Laura, in some form or fashion, is the key to defeating this evil entity, Judy. And so, given that, I don't know why Leland also specifically has to say, find Laura. I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah. It seemed like the way that Leland says that on screen, the way that Ray Wise played that, his one line in the show, also what a sadness. It's such a sadness.
Such sadness.
That we don't have more Ray Wise. It feels like such a personal plea compared to so many of the other people that are telling Cooper
that's
what
true.
to do.
That's true. Yeah.
Don't know exactly what
they're-
to draw
all
from that, but
all the rest are all buried in these incredibly complex sort of lore
yeah, because
extravaganzas.
all of Cooper's motivations do feel like they're operating almost on those two levels, where there is this thing that we're being told is happening, which is Cooper and Jeffries and Cole and Major Briggs
Yep.
know about this mystical entity that represents evil, and they're
Did we, by the way, I don't think we talked about the floating Briggs face in the theater.
A+.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
stuff. That
Yeah.
floating Briggs. He just sitting there watching it all happen. He's like, I'm here now too. Great. Major Briggs gets to hang out with Philip Jeffries and the fireman in a weird
Yep.
floating weird room.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just realized we never touched on that at
No.
all.
No.
The most
There's
content.
so many other things going on that it's so hard to even just like. I felt guilty last week talking about Gordon Cole's computer screen, but I couldn't not.
By last week, you mean earlier?
I mean
today.
earlier today. Oh my goodness.
So
There is this Judy thing and this sort of epic lore quest, but on the other hand, there is sort of the more emotional side that seems like Leland represents of just find Laura,
Yeah,
an impassioned
that's-
plea where
that's
Cooper
fair.
comes out and he's almost like, I can execute my purpose, that like the reason I went to Twin Peaks in the first place was to save this girl, and like you're saving like the idea that Agent Cooper is someone who would try to save a girl who's already dead, and that would like his intentions being so pure as to causing a little bit of a downfall feels like that kind of those two things might be coexisting.
Yeah, probably. Although something I'm struggling with in general with this season compared to especially the first season of Twin Peaks is all of the additional. I mean, this has really been happening since arguably season 2 and Fire Walk with Me as well, but this season really like pushes it a lot further. I'm kind of struggling with the idea that the character we see in the very first episodes of Twin Peaks in season 1, who comes to Twin Peaks as an FBI agent to investigate the latest in a series of what might be a series of serial murders.
Right.
I am kind of having trouble reconciling that with the notion of like this is a decades long like investigation of this specific evil force, and Laura is this like uniquely important also countervailing force, and Cooper is like going back not just to investigate her murder, but to physically save the actual person. Like there were other people who were killed.
I know. I guess
it's a tough. I don't know what it means entirely, and it's sort of tough for me to reconcile.
It can't even all coexist as one solid thing in your brain.
No, it really can't.
And that's, I guess, what I was trying to kind of get at is maybe, there is the Judy thing, but if you think about Cooper as a guy who, as a guy who, the sort of more normal Cooper, the sort of intuitive, emotional FBI agent who goes to town to solve this case and then goes through all of the insane shit that we've seen Cooper go through, I could see his actions being those almost of that character's desperation instead of, or, in addition to, or in opposition to maybe the sort of stoic, I am this FBI lord who works with Gordon Cole and I've been fighting evil. Like those two things, the things Cooper's been doing in regards to Laura in this episode, the two versions of it are not sympathetic with each other in my brain, but I can see two sort of different versions of it that are allowed to coexist. I just can't. If I try to mix it all together in my mind, it doesn't hold. It is like a kind of oil and water in terms of the two different stories.
Yeah.
But Leland's like really personal plea and the way that Cooper was even just physically dealing with Laura felt so personal and so different than any of the other things. Like the Cooper who we see in the end of 18 feels so much more like the Cooper who I would expect to be like methodically tearing through this bullshit to get to Judy until he gets really confused, and then I don't really know what to make of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like the stuff with Cooper finding Laura and trying to take her out felt so like damn it all emotional to me that it's hard to even reconcile that with the stuff Gordon was saying and with all the stuff you were saying about the lore of just like he's on, Laura's just a pawn to him to get to this stupid god or whatever.
No, that's true, and I mean,
sorry, that was a dismissive fart sound that I shouldn't have made.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
And that I guess sort of echoes nicely enough with the general theme of this season, and particularly this episode of all of these different realities, different aspects of individual people, different timelines or universes or whatever they are. I guess we just have to, as viewers of this show, just sort of accept that there are different aspects even to the core of what the show is about.
I think maybe so. When Laura Hudson was writing the Twin Peaks recaps at Vulture, she left to write Game of Thrones, I think, and someone else took over. But the refrain that she was using throughout all of the first half of season 3 when she was doing it was just nothing ever means one thing in Twin Peaks, and I thought that was a good thing to just keep in mind all the time. It basically all layers of this goddamn TV show.
Yeah, there was speaking of Laura's who wrote pieces about this show, Laura Miller, who is an absolutely fantastic critic who works at Slate, and I'm just a huge fan of basically everything she writes or says. She wrote a really good piece on this finale in which she did not attempt to pick apart all of the sort of really specifics of the lore and everything. One, because I don't think that's like what you'd find interesting for that kind of publication,
and it's futile.
But also, exactly, it's just kind of pointless. And she,
hey everyone, thanks for listening to our podcast.
Yeah, I know. She comes right out and sort of doesn't declare, but I think sort of toys with the idea that all of this has been the dream of a man named Richard. Which it's a very,
the full Saint Elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. The total Saint Elsewhere. To your point on the previous podcast about how this contains...
was it Dallas? Which TV show is it that had one season that was a dream someone had?
I thought Saint Elsewhere ends with the entire show having been a dream in the mind of that kid. But anyway, to your point about this finale, the finale of this show having every single possible TV ending trope collide. I kind of liked her willingness to explore that as a potential suggestion, because it is so overplayed that it is definitely my instinct to ignore that interpretation entirely. Mm-hmm. But I also think you can't ignore the fact that we keep hearing about how we all live within a dream, and Audrey wakes up from what might be a dream. And I don't think, to your point about Laura Hudson saying nothing means just one thing in Twin Peaks, certainly in the work of David Lynch generally. I think Laura Miller's sort of flirting with the idea that this is the dream of a man named Richard. I don't think even that has to be... I don't think that suggesting that means, and it isn't anything else, and it's just that.
Right.
Because the very ending of the episode, I think, clearly suggests that is not a sufficient explanation.
But for all we know, the man we see who wakes up as Richard could have literally been having the dream of all of the contents we saw, but also in Twin Peaks, Cooper and everything else could exist or not.
Yeah. There's something I think about Lynch's work that I don't actually think has been true of Twin Peaks, maybe until this point. I think a lot of David Lynch's film work really strenuously resists any kind of canonical, not all of it, there are movies that are less like this, certainly, but some of Twin Peaks is, some of David Lynch, refer to David Lynch as Twin Peaks, some of David Lynch's film work, I think really, really, really resists a single canonical explanation of the events. Mm-hmm. And I think this finale of this season really strongly reinforces that which is that I really don't even know that I think there is one. Like, this is the thing that happened. I think a lot of different things happened on top of each other.
Yeah, it's almost like all of these different stories are almost like written on tracing paper and laid over each other, and you can kind of reorganize them, but you can always, there's never a version where you just see a white page that has the exact words telling you what it is.
Yep. So I was going to talk about more of that stuff when we talked about Richard and Diane, but Richard and Linda, but I don't know that it matters when we talk about it. In the interest of multiple timelines and fluid realities.
You can reassemble this episode in whatever order you would like.
It's slippery in here in this podcast
studio.
Anyway, so do we want to get into Cooper meeting up with Diane in Glastonbury Grove?
Yep, so this, I assume, is the curtain call that Cooper was referring to when he looked Diane in the eyes in the Great Northern and said, "I'll see you at the curtain call."
Yeah.
Maybe that means many other things, but he literally walks out from behind a curtain having thought that maybe he accomplished a major thing and sees Diane.
Yeah. Yep. And they have also, by the way, immediately before that, Cooper has this like telekinesis power with
I think that scene was shot backwards. I think it's one of the few times we've seen Cooper do something backwards and I think that the way that was done was that the curtain was undulating because he walked out of it backwards down the hallway. And they were
that's really
it's
interesting.
also again, thing that I noticed that connects to other thing but can't divine any meaning from it. The opening credits of Twin Peaks: The Return have consistently shown the waterfall outside the Great Northern that then cuts into a billowing curtain, and it's one of the only times we've ever seen the image of one of those red room curtains actually billowing and undulating, except for this time right now when Cooper just sort of confidently walks through it out into the world.
Yeah.
Why? Who? What? Don't know, but it happened.
Yeah.
And I was like, why have I seen that before? Oh, I see it before every episode.
Again, this, just speaking of things that have been part of Twin Peaks ever since the beginning, but I think have to be considered differently now, or at least can be considered differently now that we've seen this. The backwards talking device, or backwards acting device in general, because it's not just talking, I think gains a lot of additional resonance in light of everything we've seen, right? In order to say something backwards in real life, in terms of what these actors have to actually do to create the effect, there's no such thing as improvising when speaking backwards to be played back in reverse. You have to literally know how the thing ends in order to even start saying it, because the first thing you're going to say is the last thing that comes out of your mouth on screen. And that observation feels very significant to me in the context of this episode. The observation that in the previous episode, the observation that the past dictates the future, that it is possibly the case that Cooper has tried to change the past to affect the future and found that he can't, or at least he can't in the way he expected to.
Right.
And that
it seems like he tries to, and then in the words of Philip Jeffrey, it gets slippery, and he actually slips and goes, he gets pushed off somewhere else.
Yeah, and that feels to me very, very relevant to the fact that throughout the entirety of Twin Peaks, we've had this backwards talking and acting mechanic, essentially, just as a constant, just sporadically used device. That device is it is prescribed, right? If you are engaging in it, everything you are saying
has already been said.
Already been said, exactly right. Yeah,
that's fascinating.
And so that just popped into my head just now.
Good shit, Chris.
Thanks, Jake.
My mind is exploding at the thought of that, and I don't know why, but it is.
Yeah.
I'll find out in 25 years.
I'll podcast with you again in 25 years. So, anyway, Cooper and Diane meet up in Glastonbury Grove. They ask, "Is it you? Is it really you?" "Yes, it's really me, Diane. Is it really you?" "Yeah."
Diane and Cooper at this point seem far less comfortable around each other than they did even in episode 17. It feels like Diane shows up out of fucking nowhere when another person turns into her in 17, and they're both just like, they seem very happy to see each other, and they immediately kiss. In this episode,
and they're also they're in that like bubble of perfect, wonderful Twin Peaks land. Also,
I guess probably to Diane's credit, you should be wary at this point when a man who could or could not be Dale Cooper walks out of a lodge.
Portal,
as we talked to before. And then I like that Cooper then asks, "Is it really you?" And Diane kind of gives like a half laugh and says, "Yeah," which I guess is referring to the fact that she was a constructed, weird, fake person for a while. But like,
Right.
Anyway,
stay tuned on that.
But I mean, the ice kind of breaks there, and Laura Dern kind of like lets out like a half chuckle that Cooper is even asking her that.
Right.
Which also, to her credit, her not immediately jumping down his throat for asking that when he's the one who raped her is it's me. I mean, she was being lighthearted about it, but like,
sure, but the fact that proof is probably more on him.
Yeah, Cooper turning that into a reciprocal question. She gave him the benefit of the doubt hard right then.
Yeah.
And then she studies him in the face, and he smiles. And then the curtains fade out in the woods in the most classic, good-looking way that I always love.
Yeah, it's good.
And then we totally fade out, I think, and then they're driving.
Yep, they're driving on the desert.
This whole scene of Cooper and Diane driving in a classic car. I saw Joel Bacco, who writes the blog Lost in the Movies, pointed out that it is aesthetically a complete replication of Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern's driving scene in Blue Velvet, including some of the like timbre of their conversation. Anyway,
that's really interesting. I mean, it's impossible not to view the interactions between Cooper and Diane through the lens of both of them having such long history in David Lynch works, including with each other,
including playing scenes together.
Yeah. That's something that just has a huge amount of resonance, because it's also been a long time. Not even in the context of Twin Peaks. It's been a long time since they've been together on screen under the direction of David Lynch at all.
Yeah. But seeing them just driving down the road in a car of that
that's
era,
a really good pull.
It's like, thanks.
Is it future or is it past?
Is it detective or is it pervert?
So anyway, they reach these big power lines. What is this called? What is that thing called?
I can't remember. I mean, the gigantic power lines, I feel like those just have to be the ones that are used for incredibly long distance wire runs, because they're just way off the ground and hugely structurally intense. Also, I thought it was cool that they
clustered.
I don't know what the clusters are. I mean, I know
I assume that's because they're actually going to route out.
It's going to route out. I know like a power substation is like the sort of smaller ones that you'll see in the middle of a town that just have all the big resistors and stuff. But I don't know what this one is.
Yeah.
I noticed, and also Dana noticed, that because they used these huge giant ones, the geometric shapes were also really evocative to me of the Owl Cave logo.
Oh, that's a good...
I don't know what the point of it was, but like just, whatever. Just I couldn't help but just constantly, as it kept showing those shots of all of the interconnected diamonds and squares and little spindly edges coming off, that it really looked like that symbol.
Yeah.
That Hawk talks about being the symbol that means electricity.
That's a good pull. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, they're excited that it's Cooper's, look, almost exactly 430 miles, and then he drives for like another 2 seconds.
Right.
Exactly 430 miles.
Yeah.
430.
I mean, that's after they say, sure, are you sure you want to do this?
Are you sure you want to do this?
You don't know what it's going to be like,
Yep.
when we cross over, whatever it is.
Yeah, they're clearly approaching that point and feeling some apprehension about it, because before Cooper gets out of the car, Diane also says, "Just think about it, Cooper." It's worth pointing out that 430 miles is one of the clues that the Giant gave, where the fireman, right at the very beginning, in one of the first lines of the season, was him saying, "Remember 430, Richard and Linda, 2 birds, 1 stone," were the clues from the very beginning of the season.
Yep.
All of which turned out to be relevant at the end and not during any of the middle. We were kept, we kept occasionally hoping that one of those things would show up, and it all bundles together here.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like Cooper gets out and look around just to be sure that it's the place, but then they drive.
Did you get the sense when Diane said, "Let's go," that she was kind of unnerved at all? Or I don't know if
like that it was almost ambiguously, "Let's leave"?
Or that's just that she just felt something was wrong. I don't know.
Probably. I mean, maybe.
I could be reading into her performance.
This moment is totally scary, and you have no idea what's going to happen. Like, Kyle MacLachlan gets out and looks around, and you just sort of see his coat billowing as he's just dwarfed by this huge electrical infrastructure. Then they drive, and it suddenly pops to nighttime, and it's hard to know if that happened to them in that moment, or if that was a cinematic device and we're just just cutting through time. Yeah. But it was at that moment they also both seem super stoic. Once it's cut, once that time jump happens, that's when I feel like Cooper like cements himself to me as his most like the knife's edge version of Cooper that I think we see for the rest of the episode. I felt definitively happened right there.
Yeah.
Also, again, props to Kyle MacLachlan for like his 8,000th version of Cooper. Like he walks the line so well from like the middle of this episode on of like, which Cooper am I seeing? Am I seeing both? Whatever. Okay.
I sure hope he gets recognized for it. Not that it matters. I've said it before, but I hope he does.
Anyway, you hope it gets recognized.
In public.
Yo, Dougie!
Hey, Richard! Loved you in Twin Peaks.
Mr. C.
Classic, Richard.
Starring Kyle MacLachlan as Richard. As Richard Horn.
Ugh. Yeah, by the way, speaking of every name being used twice, obviously intentional, but who knows?
It seems that Bad Coop's son, Richard, makes sense that would be Cooper's name for no reason.
No, I mean, I know. It makes sense in the sort of ambiguous logic of the way this works, but I don't know beyond that. Anyway, so they pull up to a motel. Cooper gets out and goes into the office, and then Diane sees herself.
Yeah, she's kind of like anxiously looking, it seems like, waiting for Cooper, and then sees that other Diane come out.
You know what it really reminded me of? It reminded me of the scene where the other Diane, or whatever it is, when they're going to investigate the vortex.
And she sees
and
the
Diane
woodsman?
sees all this stuff happening, and she watches it, but she doesn't react at all or do anything or tell anyone about it. It's not till much later that she sort of talks about it, but it's at the time she didn't.
I wonder now if that's because that Diane was fake.
I know. I'm thinking of her watching this, and she seems to react the same way. She watches it, she looks, but she doesn't do anything. She doesn't say anything to Cooper when he gets back. She doesn't like look worried specifically or
that's
anything.
true. I was going to say what it reminded me of was the scene in Fire Walk with Me when Cooper sees himself on the security footage where he sees a second one of him just sort of ambiently standing there, but he freaks out. He goes crazy when that happens, whereas Diane just looks at it and looks a little bit more unnerved about the situation, but otherwise doesn't change what she's doing.
Yeah.
Huh.
Anyway, so Cooper comes back out. Diane gets out. They go into the room. She turns on a light, and he tells her to turn it off, which that really felt like confirmation that he is different.
That he's different?
Yeah.
I mean,
that felt really like striking to me.
Yeah, he said it in a not confrontational way, but it did seem closer to something. It seemed closer to something that Bad Coop would do, or something at least that not regular Cooper would do. He wouldn't
and then she says, "What do we do now?" And he says, "You come over here to me." And then from that point, he's dictating to her. I mean, it's like you get the sense that the situation is consensual, or at least starts out consensually, but nonetheless, there's a really intense edge on it right from the beginning. Like no part of me at the beginning received this as sensual or like positive.
Yeah, when they kiss in the sheriff's department, it's surprising and seems weird as an audience member, but at least both characters feel like this is a thing that we both really want right now.
Yeah.
And this feels like you said, like maybe it starts off that way.
Yeah. The way
like
this
just that it is instigated at all feels like maybe there's a spark of like we should be doing this.
Yeah.
But
especially as we see Cooper increasingly try to sort of change events of the past, this really felt to me like, and they both sort of had some kind of intuitive understanding that this is what they were doing, at least initially. Mm-hmm. It really felt to me like they were trying to recreate a sort of version of traumatic, horrible events that had happened in the past, sort of take control of it, almost redo it in a way in which they're in control.
To sort of try and own their own new version of it.
Yeah. I mean, and it seems very much related to the fact that Cooper is trying to rewrite history, essentially. Mm-hmm. Except in doing so, by the end of the scene,
they seem to lose control of their controlled test.
They did, except that Cooper does not react at all.
Yeah.
He is stone-faced, and
Diane is like trying to cover his
increasingly
face.
as she's increasingly distressed, and yet continuing on with this situation, presumably because she feels like she has no choice. Yeah, she is like trying to cover his face with her
Right,
hands.
has no choice / just has no control in some sense of the word.
Yeah. And I thought it was terrifying. I thought it was absolutely terrifying. Also, side note, am I correct in saying that, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but every single case of sexual intercourse in this season is depicted with the man lying down, usually brooding, and then the woman like sort of riding on top.
I can't remember what
Are there
there was
any
besides
exceptions to that?
Besides this one and Dougie, what else was there?
Also, the teens at the beginning
Oh,
on
yeah.
the couch.
Wow, that's right. I forgot about those
Also,
teens.
Doesn't Bad Coop at some
Oh,
point?
maybe, probably. I totally don't remember. I think yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And they're all like, so the teens a little bit less so because the teens are such goofballs. But even then, it's like the teens staring at something. Like in all cases, it's the man like brooding or staring forward or staring at something while the woman like, does this like sort of actively.
Huh.
It's even if the woman is like under the obvious like duress,
Right.
either way, that is how it's depicted. And I don't know. I don't know what that means. Maybe we just learned something about what David Lynch likes, but I couldn't help but notice what seems like a pretty consistent pattern.
Yeah, no, that's true. Huh. When Diane is covering up Cooper's face, all that I could think about was that she ended up making him look like Nido to me, to the point that I even wondered if like the gaps between her fingers were also like aesthetically similar. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I don't know what.
Either, yeah.
But like that complete faceless look with just sort of skin covering skin in the low light, like it's just the way that she sort of tried to turn him into basically nobody except for the little slits between her fingers.
Yeah.
Freaked me out.
Yeah. Another thing that freaked me out was the reuse of the song My Prayer by the Platters, which we previously heard in part 8 being played over the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it kind of reminded me of it was sort of used to kind of similar effect as the
Ed and Norma?
Yeah, Ed and Norma, which was a totally different song.
Yeah.
Except that in this case, like something really distressing was happening.
It was used in the way that when I think about Blue Velvet and Blue Velvet.
Yes,
like,
Blue Velvet. Yeah,
of just like
totally. Yeah,
sort of quaint pastoral American romance, like old timey AM radio hit, put on top of something fucked up. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Side note: did you know that the Platters had one of the band members was named David Lynch?
Good.
Yep, just a true fact.
Great
about that group. So
good.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was intense. Also, so the way it was mixed was kind of interesting in that they kiss and then the song starts. And then you get this like dark drone under it that immediately starts suggesting this is maybe not the situation that it on its face might seem to be. And then, am I correct that the song kind of cuts out and then comes back in, or am I misremembering that?
You probably are not misremembering that, but I don't remember, and I don't have it in my notes either way.
Well, in any case, I thought it was really intense. And then by the end of that scene, she's crying, I think, and covering his face, and he's still just stone-faced. And the lyrics, come in at the end of My Prayer. It ends on, and it's just I just thought it was really took a scene that was quite powerful and really blew it out into something overwhelming. Anyway, he wakes up and finds a note from Diane, presumably. He calls out for Diane.
Yeah.
She's not there, and he sees a note that says, "Dear Richard, when you read this, I'll be gone. Please don't try to find me. I don't recognize you anymore." I think whatever we had is over, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Linda. Which
super good.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know, everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
The way that could apply to the specifics of a possible Diane encounter with this Cooper, who turns out to not be the evil Cooper, but still not what she expected, or basically him walking into another Dougie Jones life where things don't directly correlate to his life. It was a good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's Richard and she's Linda, I guess.
Yeah.
They were them all along, Chris.
I guess
he woke up from his dream of Twin Peaks.
Yep. He leaves, and he seems to be in a different
It's
place
a different
and time.
hotel. It's a different car.
Hotel, yeah, it's a new car.
Yeah.
The hotel looks like a more modern kind of.
Yeah, he has what looks like a generic
whatever motel.
FBI guy car.
Exactly. It looks like he has a company car for sure. Yeah. Is it future or is it past? What year is it?
Well, do you want to talk about that Odessa sign?
That is the next thing we see, basically. Yeah.
So it clarifies that he's in Odessa. Is that Texas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Chris, we saw from, I think it was our friend Brandon, that people online looked up the population of that Odessa sign.
Yeah, which is 99,405 or something.
Yeah, and that was the
99,000 something.
Yeah, that was the stated population of Odessa in 2010.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's got to be deliberate. Why it's 2010? Who can say? Cooper asking what year is it at the end, and it's saying 2010, and that sign being the sign from 2010 seems like there's probably some meaning to it beyond just something went absolutely wrong, because it seems like they would not have specifically built a prop of the Odessa sign with that population on it without meaning. Like,
it feels very intentional.
You could
how else could it?
Right, you could send a location crew out to film the real Odessa sign, or you could literally go to their Wikipedia page today and look up their population and make it correct.
Yes,
and
even
they
if
chose
you were just adding it in post.
Right, and they chose not to. So, whatever they did there was a specific choice to show the 2010 Odessa population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we didn't talk a lot about earlier in this season was theories people had online about there being two timelines, and using all kinds of investigation into. I think
people thought specifically for a while that Dougie Jones was taking place in 2003 because his license plate said 03 on it, and then someone from Las Vegas said, actually that is a month. It means that Dougie Jones's license plates renew in March.
That was. Okay, I didn't really pay attention to those theories, so I didn't know.
The color of it, the color of the sticker on his plate, I believe, is the year, and the 03 was the month that you need to renew. So if you have a 3 and the wrong color past that month.
Right.
But those people hopefully are feeling at least vindicated on some axis now that Cooper might have traveled into not only another place, but another time.
Yeah. So he sees Eat at Judy's coffee shop.
Yep.
And he does. He doesn't eat, but he gets coffee.
He gets coffee. Yeah. He gets coffee that is still not so satisfying as a fan of Twin Peaks would like to see.
No, he doesn't seem to care.
No, he just drinks his coffee.
Yeah. So this is a scene that feels like it might as well have been featuring this is basically like a slightly less intense Bad Coop scene, right?
Yeah.
Like he acts in self-defense, but he also acts without really regard for the personal safety of innocent people.
His overall motive seems more emotionally pure, but the way that he gets there is messed up.
Yeah.
Basically.
And he does put innocent people directly in danger unnecessarily.
Yes.
When he drops the gun in the hot oil.
And when he just, basically, as he's turning around, he never lowers his pistol. He just sort of waves it right past everyone when slowly turning around to assess the scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, he acts like everyone there is a threat other than the information that he needs, which feels very bad Coop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a whole lot to talk about in this moment other than...
Yeah, I mean, that was really the moment where it was clear that this was different
something
Cooper.
has happened to Cooper.
I mean, it was pretty clear to me in the previous scene, but...
Yeah, the way that he rapidly disarms that guy, shoots someone in the foot, and then stands up. Like,
I mean, even in the Diane.
Oh,
scene.
I mean, this scene. Yeah, Cooper going through all those actions was like any inkling that you had that you may or may not be perceiving that were confirmed 100% that this is not like good old Pierre Dale Cooper anymore.
Good old who?
Pure.
Oh, I thought you said Peter Dale Cooper.
Oh, like, you don't know his full name, Chris? I guess you didn't listen to those tapes that they released back in the 90s. Pure.
Yes, no, it wasn't pure Coop. So, yeah, I mean, again, I think the specifics of this scene are... Yeah. I don't know that we have to rehash them.
He seems to have been expecting, though, that a woman named Laura Palmer would be working there as a waitress.
That's what I thought he meant. That's what I thought he was looking for as well.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know.
He seemed to have some information that... Like, my read on all of that was that he thought somehow he would save Laura from getting murdered that night. She would somehow go on living her life and end up eventually in Odessa, Texas as a waitress.
But if he doesn't realize... Yeah.
I don't know why he would think all of those things, because that's a huge, outrageous leap to make.
Yeah, I don't know where that information would have come from or what.
That was just what I was intuiting until all of those theories got knocked over one by one.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know, when it's not Laura, when it's a different person, when she has no memory of that life and doesn't know Twin Peaks. And etc.
Yeah.
But he seems to know by some means.
Which is, again, this is
Is it
kind
lore?
of
Is
how
it
Cooper
is it
always
Cooper intuition?
works,
Yeah, maybe he knocked
yeah.
the milk bottle over earlier and we just didn't see it.
right. Yeah.
So
He leaves, still holding the gun, by the way, as he's leaving. Drives away to an address number 1516, but then we see the classic number 6 telephone pole
with the little serial number underneath it.
again. Yeah, which is weird because obviously that's not in Texas.
No, but I mean, it's also changed locations a couple times because we saw it in Fire Walk with Me, I believe, outside of the Deer Meadow trailer park, and then it's on the intersection. It's at 21st and Sparkwood. Is that the address? Whatever that. God. The Sparkwood in 21, where the kid gets hit by Richard Horn.
Yeah.
Then we see it there, and now he sees it in Odessa, Texas.
Yeah.
Obviously in a completely different world.
Right.
I also don't know if the phone pole was meant to have moved in Twin Peaks.
I wasn't really sure about that either.
Because the Fat Trout Trailer Park is in Deer Meadow in Fire Walk with Me, and then now it has a little tiny word "new" above Fat Trout Trailer Park, implying that
so it might actually be a different
that Carl moved it. But
Yeah.
whatever, he sees that pole completely, obviously, way far away from anywhere where it ever should be.
Mm-hmm. It's not clear if he reacts to that directly or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. So anyway, we get after that a while of Cooper interacting with this woman who he determines to be Carrie Page, who resolutely denies any knowledge of Laura Palmer. Although it's felt like there was slight, like when he's trying to jog her.
There's some familiarity to her. Like
when he says her parents' names, she has almost a pause, and then she says, "Sarah, what's going on?" And it kind of feels like that's the first thing that where there's a flash of recognition.
Yep.
I mean, it's unclear because the way she responds to him is also very stilted, where he says, "So the name Laura Palmer means nothing to you?" And her response is, "I don't know what you want, but I'm not her," which is a weird way to answer that question.
It's not a denial.
Yeah,
I mean, it is a denial, but not.
But it's a weird denial. It's a circuitous denial.
Yeah, it's circuitous.
Right? If you were flatly denying, you would just say, no,
I don't know who you're
nothing.
talking about. That doesn't mean anything.
I literally have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah. But it's also
she acts like someone else has at one point accused her of being Laura Palmer.
Right. But it's also the case, but she doesn't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But it's also the case that David Lynch, as you pointed out earlier, often directs his actors to deliver lines in stilted ways. So it's really tough to know what the implication of this is.
Yeah, it's, she could have also, even though we never heard her say it, the way that she responds to Sarah reminded me of the way that Laura reacts to Cooper in the previous episode where she says, "You were in my dream in a dream." Him showing up at all could be an echo of familiarity to her in a way that is not concretely accessible even to her, but just that this is happening is meaningful because she dreamt it or because, she's hanging out next to that number 6 light pole.
Yeah. He also says to her, "I want to take you to your mother's home. It's very important." Which
it's that same line.
It's that same line from the previous episode that Andy uses.
Right.
And that Lucy then repeats.
To
I don't
the
know. That could be a total coincidence. It's not as though it's a particularly unique phrase, but I don't know. I just noticed it right now.
Yep.
She's got a dead guy in her house.
She does have a dead guy in her house, and I saw,
as you mentioned,
I saw people postulate that it was a suicide, but then people also disagreed and said that it looked like maybe it wasn't. So, who knows? It was someone with. Either way, there's a dead guy with a gunshot wound and barf that might be creamed corn. There's also a little horse, a little classic white horse there, just to freak you out.
Mm-hmm. It was just to Blade Runner it up a little bit.
It was just a good detail. Cheryl Lee is doing a spectacular job. Also, she has had nearly nothing to do in this season other than her couple scenes as Laura Palmer. So having her show up, also a character who has now played 3 different people on Twin Peaks because she played Laura Palmer, Maddie Ferguson,
that's true,
and now
Page.
Carrie Page. I just wasn't expecting. I mean, I wasn't. I just wasn't expecting Cooper to open up that door and for there to be a completely different character who looks like Laura Palmer, but has clearly lived a different life and grew up in a different part of the country. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, weird that you weren't.
I wasn't expecting that. Once I realized what was going on, I was delighted by Cheryl Lee being given a completely new character to play on Twin Peaks for her, the grand total of a half hour that she ends up in the season.
Yep. No, I thought that was a lot of fun as well. was notable to me that the phone was ringing as they left, and no one acknowledged that. Also, that Cooper didn't seem to acknowledge or care about the dead body.
That again, it seemed both like he was maybe in a dreamlike state, and also that Cooper just was a weirdly muted Cooper who seemed like he was an amalgam of both Coopers.
That doesn't seem like how classic Dale Cooper would have reacted to the situation. But and as well as when they drive away, he is basically wordless.
Yeah,
it was. And they really. We get a lot of time of them just driving and saying nothing.
Yep.
It was very heavily reinforced that this was a very silent, taciturn car ride for a long distance.
Yeah, driving across half of the United States.
Yeah,
the diagonal way too. Like it's a long trip.
Yeah. Oh, and when she says, "Are you really an FBI agent?" and all he does is just show her the badge. Still, as I recall, doesn't really say anything. There's that whole sequence with the headlights following them, but then that's nothing.
And she's briefly worried about it. I think.
Yeah. It's just there's just a lot of long shots.
I know it was honestly very sad to watch to me. The idea of being on a long road trip with someone, but it's in a situation where just because of how things play out, you're not going to be talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect for very different reasons than this one, which are I fell through another world or whatever. It's not an uncommon story for people to have experienced, and it's also it's never going to bring up good memories of that time in your life.
No, and that's and she she says, Odessa, I tried to keep a clean house, keep everything organized. I thought she sort of fell asleep for a bit, but I don't know if she actually does. And then she says, those days I was too young to know any better, which obviously can mean a million things in the context of...
Right. But you see at the house that she left, and it seems like Cooper showing up, although it is not what she expected or necessarily wanted, isn't going to let the opportunity to just get in a car with a stranger and leave town to pass her by.
No, for sure. No, absolutely. But I just mean, like, when she says, those days I was too young to know any better, that obviously just also has a lot of resonance in the context of Laura Palmer.
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's impossible not to hear that both ways. They stop at a gas station. Again, nothing happens.
Yep.
They get back on the road. We get a driving shot that is the same one we get when Bad Coop is driving.
Yes.
Which I thought was notable.
Yes, for sure. It's good Coop, or whatever this Coop is. Coop is, he's doing the Lost Highway thing as he gets closer to Twin Peaks.
Yeah. And then they cross a bridge that I don't think is meant to be the actual bridge that Renette Pulaski stumbles along,
I think that's
but
a
it's
train
very
bridge.
Similar.
Yes.
It's that trestle
Yeah, it's
style.
got that trestle style.
Yeah. I did think it was intended to be a specific echo of that moment because we also passed the Double R Diner.
That Double R
Cooper does not react to.
And that Double R Diner looks bleak. Like any feeling that you had that you would be able to understand what's going to happen next, which admittedly you do not have.
Yeah.
That crossing the train bridge and then going past the Double R was like, whatever's gonna happen is gonna be real bad. Like I don't think we've ever seen the Double R in Twin Peaks closed.
No, and it didn't have the Double R to go sign, which has been a notable addition in this season.
Yep, and that could be because we're...
What year is it?
It could be because we're in future or past, or just because we're in a different place. Like, for all we know, whatever Norma exists in this time doesn't have the Double R. Like, it just feels like... It feels... That shot of Twin Peaks downtown...
This is a world in which that guy took it over and then the franchise went out of business.
Yeah. Oh, it's
probably not.
It's Back to the Future, too. You've never seen it. It felt... Seeing that version of Twin Peaks at night...
That sounded like a total, like... bringing up a super obscure art film. It's like Back to the Future 2. You've never seen it.
I love that on this podcast you haven't seen Back to the Future 2. But whatever. The version of Twin Peaks that they drive past feels like what I imagine that actual bit of South Bend. Is that where it is?
Oh, where they filmed the show?
Yeah. Just what it would look like after dark. Just like a regular-ass American town that is probably so small as to not quite have the support network that it needs institutionally. Yeah. In this point in its history, in the 2010s, to have like a bustling nightlife, to have a vibrant downtown. Like it just looked like the sort of diner that you drive by and like, wow, that place was probably really cool, in the 60s, in the 40s. But now it's probably just kind of a dumpy place that like will grill you up a char-broiled hamburger.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot to read from just the lights being off, but it just was so unadorned after seeing Twin Peaks always as this sort of magical romantic place.
Absolutely. And I think it dovetails very well with the implication of sort of the Rancho Rosa housing development and
Yeah.
Janie E. talk about our terrible cars and our sort of
Yeah.
like how people can't get ahead. I mean, this show definitely exists in a sort of post-financial collapse
Yes.
world that is, aware of, I think, just the way that wealth is distributed and everything else. I mean, it all feels like it is aware of that in a way that the original Twin Peaks, I think, very intentionally never quite felt like it was part of the actual real mundane world.
Yeah, whatever version of Twin Peaks they're driving through right now is geographically the same, but it is not inside of the same bubble that that like quote unquote our Twin Peaks usually is.
Yeah.
Whatever else is going on with the number, the people and the names and the lives and whatever else, this is just, if Twin Peaks really existed in the Pacific Northwest, that's what it would look like. Probably because it is what it looks like.
Yeah, yeah. So they arrive at Sarah Palmer's house. She recognizes nothing. He takes her.
Laura recognizes nothing.
Laura recognizes. Sorry, yeah. Laura recognizes nothing. Laura/Carrie, and
oh, sorry, jeez.
Cooper takes her up to the door, and I was just on the edge of my seat waiting for that door to open. I mean, I don't know what I expected to happen. I mean, I guess I did I did for some reason still expect Sarah Palmer to open it. Obviously, she did not. Yeah.
Instead, a random woman, who it should be known as the actual owner of that house in Washington State.
Which feels like, on the one hand, is probably mainly just a thing that David Lynch thought was cool and doesn't really matter because who cares?
It reinforces the sort of magicless, mundane version of the world that they're in.
Yeah, and I think I think really is a weirdly, if in fact any amount of this is suggesting that a man named Richard woke up for a dream, that is the most outrageously meta accurate way to suggest it.
Yep.
That this actual woman who in our real world in which the television show Twin Peaks takes place, like is released on televisions.
Had she been watching Invitation to Love, I would have pooped.
Yeah, I know.
Had she been watching Twin Peaks,
Yeah.
On which someone was watching Invitation to Love,
Right.
on both of which were Dale Cooper knocking on a door. Dale Cooper's knocking on a door while she's watching Dale Cooper knock on a door on
In Twin
TV,
Peaks.
while in the background, Chet is knocking on a door.
In Invitation to Love, yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, the tidiness of that is
Not.
is interrupted by the fact that her name is Tremont.
Yeah.
And she bought the house from a Chalfont, which tie this very much in with some weird version of reality, but
lodge
definitely
lore,
not the same one that we knew from the old Twin Peaks series or Fire Walk with Me.
But it reinforced the idea that the sort of between spaces are actually spaces between two worlds or between worlds.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know that it... Oh, her name was Alice Tremont specifically, she says.
Okay.
I don't know if Alice means anything.
I don't either.
Other than the thing that everyone points out anytime any character's named Alice, which is...
Yeah, sure.
Alice in Wonderland. But there's just a bunch of more, do you recognize anything about this? Do you know it? Like, whatever. No answers are forthcoming other than the Tremont thing and the Chalfont.
I mean, the door closes, they start walking away. Someone whispers Laura? Is that correct?
Yeah, it sort of sounded like Sarah Palmer, maybe?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And then she screams, and then all of the lights in the house go out.
Yeah. And then all the lights in the world go out.
I guess because it cuts to black.
Yeah.
But
it felt to me like something bigger than
like
just the house.
Things extinguished.
It felt like that was part of the actual action. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think so? When we hear you had mentioned the sort of between two worlds thing, and then we hear Sarah Palmer or I don't know, maybe Sarah Palmer. We hear the voice sort of whisper Laura. That reminded me of the line in Mike's poem, "One chance out between two worlds."
Right. It's ambiguous as well. That is CHANCE or CHANTS, by the way.
I researched this a lot.
Okay.
Because of that ambiguity, and I am pretty confident it is chance, CHANTS.
Okay.
I think at one point in one of the scripts it was written chance with a C, but it seems like anytime anyone involved has actually answered any question about it,
it's chant.
It is chant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, Who knows? It could also have been chosen explicitly because it sounds like both words.
Right.
But I think if we have to declare it's one, I believe it is chant.
I have always thought that it was chant. But yeah, the name Laura whispered and then her screaming, especially if, as sort of randomly hypothesized by me early at the beginning of this episode, that was somehow hitting both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a chant out between two worlds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Laura.
I guess
Waldo the bird knew it all along.
I guess actually Cooper says what year is this before that happens. We
Yeah.
didn't
That's right.
mention that.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course he does, because he's got to. Like
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah. He's just wondering if it's future or if it's past.
Oh my God! Him saying what year is this is. Even that means nothing to us.
I know.
Because Cooper has been operating even in this weird world with clearly a set of expectations that we aren't privy to.
Yeah.
Like where he knows where to find this woman who looks just like Laura Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
And he expects that diner to exist. He doesn't seem to expect that his name's going to be wrong. He doesn't expect that certain things are wrong. But
Right.
it seems like he at least has enough bearing on it.
But it's not the year that seemed like it was
Yeah, even the fact
unexpected.
that the year's different. Like
Yeah.
Sarah Palmer never left that house very
Right,
clearly. No
right.
matter what, we know
Right.
from just everything that we've seen that
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have a bearing on that.
Yeah.
But Cooper seems to know that it means something, and
Mm-hmm.
that is probably one of the most like tangible reasons why people were the people who were upset with the finale of Twin Peaks were upset with it.
Oh, you think so?
I think that the Cooper saying what year is it and Laura screaming can in some ways feel like just a rug pull, or like, oh, you're just throwing one more thing into the mix right before the camera cuts. That's not
Yeah.
how I read it, but I feel like
Yeah.
it's the How's Annie of this season, right? Of
Right,
him like
and
bashing his head against the wall saying How's
Yeah.
Annie, and you seeing Bob's reflection of just like there's another thing now that you're not going to tell me.
Right.
I think that it folds back in and tracks fine.
Yeah, I mean, the How's Annie is a weird case because that was something he was basically repeating. He was sort of mockingly repeating, right? But through
Yeah.
repetition, and because it was the last thing said, it's been turned into like almost a key or like a lock that has to be
Yeah.
fitted with a key to answer questions. But I
that
don't
felt like
think
it was
that's
Bob
actually what it
/
is.
doppelganger Coop just like laughing at how well he
Yeah.
fooled some idiot into thinking
Yeah.
he was goody two shoes Cooper.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the actual important thing from that scene is like the way that Kyle MacLachlan plays it and acts,
Yeah.
right? And I think similarly in this scene, the thing that's important is Cooper's bewilderment about something being wrong. I mean, maybe the year is specifically important, but in general, I think even without knowing the exact meaning in answer to that, I think the scene plays because of the way Kyle MacLachlan acts, the way that
Right.
the
feeling that he's overreached and is lost.
Yeah.
Basically, he is lost / has lost. But
Yeah.
more he's lost.
and then that scream and the overall effect of everything
Yeah.
put together just was, I thought, astonishing.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like he had this meticulous attempt to bring back the world as it should be, and then like the mirror
He
just
ended up
shattered.
in a place
It's-
and time that
just every
demonstrates it did not.
and just dragged this person across the world, and
Right.
then just he
gets
pushed
a
her
lot of,
right
he
into
gets
it.
a lot of clues that things aren't what he expects them to be, and yet he doesn't stop pushing forward.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't expect that Richard and Linda I mean, he's baffled by that. It's not as though he
Right.
expected that to happen.
It's hard to know. It's hard to know what to make of all of that because I don't really like. I've probably on this podcast postulated a lot of things that insinuate that I think that it's like a full-throated indictment of the character of Dale Cooper, or that he maybe somehow deserves this because of some character flaw that he has. I don't think that either, but I don't think that in an explicitly concrete way. Like I don't think that Frost and Lynch are somehow like indicting their own character through these actions, but it's been interesting watching what from a lot of angles does feel like the fall of Agent Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
I just like whether or not he quote unquote deserves it is a reading that I don't feel qualified to state, and I don't know if
I
the
also
show's
don't
interested
really
in it.
I don't think the show's interested in that, and I don't think that a lot of terrible things happen to people on this show, and I don't think it's fair to talk about who deserves it.
Yeah, I think Cooper, despite all of his best intentions, is not immune from the sort of from existence's attempt to pull you down.
Yeah.
I guess like he's managed to stay above it and be pained by it and always try to save people from it, but it feels like he eventually got at the end of this at the end of this show.
Yeah. At the end of this game we call life.
Oh no! At the end of this, he thought that it was over after he defeated the final boss, Bob Orb, the Bob
Yeah, I mean, we can probably essentially wrap this up. I think we've tied a lot of different theories and takes on this all throughout this episode and the previous one. So I don't know that I don't feel capable of assigning one conclusive meaning or takeaway at this point beyond everything we've sort of tried scratching at over the last 3 hours of discussion.
I think the most concrete thing that I could personally try to say is that I felt like episodes 17 and 18 in combination served to actually reinforce and sort of reinvigorate a lot of the themes that I've always thought Twin Peaks was concerned with, especially the Laura Palmer arc and Fire Walk With Me, about the way that humans treat each other and the cycle of violence and violence against women and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, he says dismissively. I had found myself really lost in the sea with some of that stuff in season 3.
This will be a very interesting rewatch.
And I'm so thrilled to finally go back and rewatch it again.
Yeah.
We probably won't do a podcast of that immediately, but I'm really interested.
But at some point we should.
Yeah. I think it would be really fun. But other than that sort of broad thing that I said of, Twin Peaks has reinforced some of the themes of Twin Peaks as my incisive read. I'm sure there's plenty more to say, and I think we're still doing yet another episode of this show after this because we've done no reader mail.
It's true. We got plenty more to do of that. It's worth remembering something that we have talked about a lot on this podcast, but we have not mentioned specifically having finished this whole season. This was an incredible season of television. By incredible, I mean remarkable in the most literal sense. It is unusual, worth remarking on, and outside of the context of just about any established expectations for what television is, which, I'm using sort of breathless language here that's just like, it's just so amazing. But I'm being as literal as I can. I think this show legitimately, whether you like it or not, challenges expectations of television in ways that are at least as huge as the original run of Twin Peaks did at the time it was aired. Mm-hmm. And it's been really cool to watch it live. I don't know that watching any season of television live has felt like this, which isn't to say it's my favorite show ever.
No, but it's an 18-week window of
unique.
Yeah, it's an 18-week window of time that is clearly not going to be reproduced as far as the experiences of this show and what it contained being aired week to week on television.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad we had this podcast going
to document it.
To get our thoughts out as it was happening. I think that's going to be a really interesting experience for us to have had, especially if we do go back and
I know, we're going to be such lore masters next time. We're going to get it all right, every detail, every name.
Yeah. And thank you so much to all of the listeners who have followed us along, both on the podcast feed and on YouTube. That's been really fun. I'm looking forward to doing more of our reader mail next week. But even aside from that, whether you've written it or not, it's been really cool and kind of a privilege to get to accompany people as this incredibly unusual and fascinating show has aired.
And also, now that Twin Peaks is over, now that we've seen all 18 episodes of season 3, the writing, both professionally across people who have been doing recap columns and people who have been doing blogs, and also the stuff people have been bringing to the Idol forums, has been incredible.
It's amazing.
Now that people have this whole work to discuss, the thoughts that people have been putting into Twin Peaks have been off the charts. And this like the last couple days, I've just been devouring all of it, sort of separate from my own notes, and it's so good. People have so much to say and so much to pull from the show, and that's also rare for TV. Even great TV doesn't have this much space in it. Mm-hmm. I've seen some people frustrated that they feel that the audience and the audience's wishes have not been taken into account by Frost and Lynch by not delivering an overtly, concretely satisfying, wish-fulfilling interest. And what I just said reminded me that Twin Peaks does take the audience into account in an incredibly respectful, if different way. Twin Peaks does not necessarily enable you or this season of Twin Peaks did not enable me to just have all of my Twin Peaks fantasies carried out, but it left me personally more room for reflection and thought than basically any TV show I've watched in ages and ages, maybe ever.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there are some great TV shows that I've done a lot of thinking about, like, whatever. You could name many of the top TV shows of all time. But the space that I felt I've been left as an audience member, the sort of respectful space for me to interpret the show and for me to bring my own meaning into it is a thing that this season excels at in a way that most TV doesn't. And I would personally consider that more respectful to an audience than in some ways than a show that just tells you to feel good all the time.
It certainly it certainly offers a lot of confidence. It demonstrates a lot of confidence in its audience.
I guess that's what I mean by respecting the audience. It's not necessarily respecting
your wishes.
My wishes.
But rather respecting your ability to engage with the thing fully.
Yeah. That's been really refreshing and fun and invigorating.
All right. Well, this has been great. We will be back next week with reader mail and I guess assorted thoughts.
Yep.
So do keep subscribing for that. And thank you for listening to this episode and all of the episodes of Twin Peaks Rewatch. This has been such a fun thing to do. You can still write us email to twinpeaks@idlethumbs.net. Our website is twinpeaksrewatch.com, and you will definitely want to head to the Idle forums and talk about... we have one combined discussion thread for parts 17 and 18. I don't know how that's going to shake out once these episodes are separate, but that's fine. You can go over to the forums and share all your theories and read all the incredibly insightful and interesting things people have been saying about these episodes and the season. I've been loving that thread.
Yep.
So twinpeaksrewatch.com for links to everything. And we will be back next week. Bye.
Bye.